Welcome to the edge. It's an election year like none other. A president who's out there spreading the virus, but hoping to get his poll numbers up from his shrinking base. But whatever's true, that was also true in 2016, except now the numbers are different. They're larger. And the polling says those polling numbers are larger. But what is polling in numbers you get? Is polling a way to prove anything? Only if it's called exit polling. What does exit polling mean? When the person leaves the polling station or the precinct and does their vote and said, "This is how I voted." Well, the election hasn't happened, so the exit polling can't happen either, can it? But we did have an evidence of something unusual. In one of the previous shows, I talked about how three states are indicative of how maybe the nation's going to go. And the suspect part of the Republican polling is Republican women and what they actually do, not what you think they're going to do, not what their husband says they're going to do. Republican women are the weak link in the polling for the Republicans and for Trump. About 3 weeks ago, and I said this on past shows, two weeks ago it was actually, he leaned over the podium and said to the Republican women, "You suburbanite women, please like me. Please vote for me. Please like me." Now that is called fear. And why did he do that? Because the secret inside polling is that the Republican women are splitting the Republican vote. And the Republican vote isn't showing up as man and woman, it's showing up as man and wife voting solidly Republican in their imagination. So, where's the contradiction in this whole thing? The exit polling that's already happened in Kentucky, in Louisiana, and in Virginia. And let me remind you, that was women after they left the polling station saying they voted Democrat as Republican women. And they did it in a big way, so that the governors of those three states became Democrat governors and were Republican governors. Now, that's a statewide election that happened in the late spring. That's history. But is it? It's history that means something. It means Republican women generally, and in the polling about women alone, they're joining in with a lot of women who are rejecting Trump. Republican men are all on board with Trump for the most part, the uneducated ones especially. And the uneducated ones don't have background, and that's what makes them uneducated. They don't have good references to fall back on to know things. But that's not enough to help Trump win the election. If he's losing half of the Republican vote, which women represent, and they're usually solid voters. So when the registration is picking up among Republicans, and it is, that does mean Republican women are registering right along with their husband. Not independent of a man, but they're usually married. They're more conservative, and they follow as a family. But privately, they're saying, "Honey, I'm all in for good old Donald. I'm going to vote with you all the way, but I'll never tell you. I'm having an affair on the side. I'll never tell you." Oh, by the way, who would? Remember Bill Clinton? Why should he? "I never had sex with that man." Oh, no, he's a woman. I mean, he's a man and he had a woman. And the wife would say, "I never had sex with that man, and I vote Republican all the time." You have to believe that. And you better not, because that's where the ball game's being played. So don't expect to trust the polls, double digit leads. It's probably higher because of the women. The Republican women or the unknown. And they proved it in those southern states. If they voted that way in southern states, just know this: those are the most conservative women usually who tend to do what their husbands tell them to do. And in fact, they didn't. So what do you think's happening in the Middle West or in the northern states? Even more independent of their husbands. Are they going to, probably up north, they're probably saying, hey, I vote the way I want, honey. You vote the way you want. But in the South, in the conservative states, they tend to vote like their husbands. And they let everybody know, oh, my honey, I always do what my honey wants. Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. Uh-huh, sure. Show enough, hon. Baloney. But we know now that that's been proven wrong. So that's the thing with polling, especially now. The most valid way to know is exit polling. Now, there's two kinds of exit polling going on. The one other one is the exit polling where they call up the mail-in ballots, because a mail-in ballot has a phone number attached to it. And they can verify every one of those mail-in ballots, and that becomes an exit poll factually proving how people voted. So when you do a mail-in ballot, they can call you up and say, did you vote this way? And that's how they do that, and they can and will do that. I met with a group this evening who talked about this very thing. Well, this thing, there are people preparing, there's lawyers and so forth, preparing for contests of an unusual kind, much like 2004, Gore v. Bush, when the Supreme Court awarded the election to Bush, taking away the popular vote and the electoral vote. They took them both away. But we have an unreliable system. If this election turns into something like Gore v. Bush, our whole, what we call democracy, is in peril. There's going to have to be a complete reform of the election system, and it's got to be taken away from the states. There's no other choice down the road. We're moving. If this becomes a difficult fight, that's where we're moving. That is why the 25th Amendment may come into play in this, because if Trump starts to call out people to disrupt the voting, which he basically has done, the party is going to say enough of that and will walk away from him going into the election time. And I think very possibly will threaten him with the 25th amendment to the Constitution, which they will make him a sitting president going into the election, and he'll be and the acting president, who in the transition time will be Pence, so they don't have big disruptions in everything in the process, to try to reestablish some trust in the election process. And McConnell and Pence will do this, and that's what Nancy Pelosi suggested when she signaled back in October 9th on a Friday morning. So this ball game is being played very curiously. They know what exit polling is, and over the line calling, getting people out to vote, is not polling. But you are talking to somebody, and they're going to tell you what you want to hear, and if they're honest, what you don't want to hear. But the vote is always told after the vote has gone in. That's called, as they leave the vote behind, that's the exit, and that's the end of the vote. I want to thank you very much. I'm sure most of you out there know about this sort of thing. And if you have anything to correct me about or comment on, you can go to Facebook, and I think you can go on Twitter as well. I'm not sure if we've got that account yet set up for people to contact on Twitter. I do have a Twitter account called, just under Augi and AUGI. So please have at it, and please subscribe if you like what we say. If you're tired of what we say, tell us that too. And I want to be on the edge as to what is the truth that you don't always hear. So again, thank you. Tune in.